Yo guys, sorry you already know, today we're back playing some more Raging Loop, and today we are reading the final extra story, as this is going to be Sheep versus Stack of Reports, which if I had to guess by the title is probably some sort of comedy. It's actually just a documentary, which is interesting, and I guess it's going to involve the Sheep character. So we'll see what this story is like. Hopefully it's not too long. The last story wasn't too long. And then this will be all for the extras, and then we can get into Revelation mode. And then we can, start learning all the answers that this game has for us, or learning all the mysteries and whatnot. So let's go ahead and not waste any time. Let's get right into it. One's dream is another reality. An entity viewing everything from outside the story aims to recap the incident from another viewpoint and tie up loose ends. That's interesting. I'm going to read it. I hope this doesn't. This shouldn't. The game said that there's no Revelation mode information in here, so hopefully this isn't like spoiling anything. But let's do it. Alright, writer, Mitsuji Misamine, 8/21/2003. Summary, I somehow resolved it. The end. Perfect. God damn it. Did you finish your summer homework? Can't you tell just by looking? I ain't suited to writing this crap. With rights come responsibilities. The church seeks complete compliance with those principles from its members. Yeah, I know, reporting on jinx-like activities, joint suppression, was it? It's necessary, I get that. Still, it don't change that this ain't really, my thing. Man, I wish immediate would fall in my head. In some vacation mood, are we? It's easy, once you get used to it. I gotta take care of this to get used to it, but I need to be used to it so I can take care of this. It's such pain. Sure isn't the idea of contacting your ex again that's got you all bothered? Oh, so I'm right. No, that's part of it, but I really, hate reading and writing shit. True, after all. It doesn't look like you, read that preliminary report I worked so hard to write. Sorry. I'm worried about you. I know what it's like to have so much dumped on you right after joining, but it's during missions like these that information priority must be preserved at all costs. You're right, I'll keep that in mind. I'll go brew some coffee, I'll take a look afterwards. Wait, no, I feel bad. I need to hold back, though we recommend self-supporting endeavors. It's not our duty to suffer over unreasonable demands. I plan to provide help when you need it as your watchdog. Wait there, okay? After her blindingly white superior left, Mitsuji Misamine let out a deliberately loud sigh. She'd expected grumbling would make a difference in an organization like this, but it appeared to have no effect. In actuality, as a member of their active force, she had plenty of experience with recon and reports. It wasn't her lack of literacy talent or her ex-boyfriend Haruaki Fusaishi or whatever his real name was. That was the problem. It was figuring out how to write the report while keeping her power hidden. Mitsuji Misamine was Sheep, which is I did want to bring up just because they're bringing up Haruaki again, and I think I got like conflicting comments like about how it's been brought up multiple times and that's not his real name or whatever, but like that's the only thing that they refer to him as. And even like this character who was like dated him or whatever, like would she not know his real name, or has he been using a fake name for like a long time? And at what point, if you're using a fake name for like how long, if that's the only name you use, does that become your real name? Because if that's the only name you go by, I feel like that kind of just becomes your real name. But either way, but yeah, she was a sheep. Or rather, Mitsuji Misamine was a name she'd simply given to herself as a play on Hitsuji, or sheep. In reality, her true name was simply Sheep. Okay. As the name indicated, she lived in a very peculiar environment until recently, though her current environment was pretty peculiar on its own. After all, normal people were completely unaware of the church. But the sheep's existence was heretical even to them, so she needed to hide her true nature even within the already concealed church. I feel like this is going to get really complicated, and I'm not going to follow it all, but I'll do my best. She, they had unnatural powers. Here, unnatural powers refer to things that would be generally considered superpowers or magic. Supernatural powers right out of the realm of fiction. Those powers thought only to exist in fantasy did in fact actually exist, in a sense anyway. These superpowers assumed to exist in a certain sense were known by many different names. From the perspective of the church, they were called jinxes. The church claimed that jinxes were superpowers born of beings isolated from human socialization. It was hard to understand when written like this, so the church often explained using a cult and a Rain Man as an example. There was a man who similarly brought rain to any event he participated in. This left an impression on that group, who began treating him as a genuine rainbringer. A cult showcased superpowers within itself. Until the cult was exposed from the outside, these superpowers were treated as the real deal. Even if there were rules that defied common sense and accepted science, there were cases where those separated from human relations could adopt those rules. Therefore, jinxes were those superpowers that existed via this agreement to abandon common sense, also known as a contract. This didn't mean that jinxes were a mere game of make-believe. Rather, jinxes were a definitive phenomenon, and threat to the ones who'd executed a contract. But as a result of their nature, jinxes could not be scientifically proven nor debunked. In the first place, it was inherent to jinxes that people who want to prove themselves got repelled from human relations at the very earliest stage. That was why the church advocated for separating the events of the world of jinxes from normal society, resolving them and covering them up. This mindset was incompatible with the congregation who called for harmony between jinxes and normal humans, and the Parliament, who wished to rule peacefully using jinxes. That was why the Academia, whose goal was to study what jinxes were, discuss them, were the dominant faction. There are many passing pre-existing religious, fundamentalist, and destructive ideology groups that oppose the four. Jinx society was spread all across the globe. Their numbers said to be in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands. And naturally, due to their nature of being isolated relationships, there were millions out there that remained undiscovered by Jinx society. This world did not adhere to common sense as well as people thought it did, and opinions shared by those who knew about jinxes. Jinxes could include any unusual abilities, as long as those who know about them acknowledge them. From magical abilities out of storybooks like breathing fire and shooting lightning to showing illusions and altering reality, the possibilities were limitless. Generally, it was believed that the less a person adhered to common sense, the more absurd jinxes they could acknowledge, or be acknowledged by. Therefore, there was a trend of describing jinxes with the simple phrase, superpowers born from twisted personalities. When put that way, Mitsuji believed that as long as others were as twisted as her, it wasn't strange for them to have these powers. It wasn't just her, it was them. Most of them had been forced to scatter, and she was sure the majority of them had been killed. She had been lucky, that or clever. She had managed to survive not by fighting, but by choosing to flee. Thus she needed to keep giving her all, so she could survive, so she could prolong her fortune. The moment she reached out to her keyboard, she felt a pair of hands from behind gently overlap her own. She thought her heart was going to stop. She hadn't felt that presence at all. White hands, long white sleeves. The superior of ambiguous age she had just been speaking with. The woman's fingers moved, making Mitsuji type the following words like a puppet master. Summary. I, Mitsuji Misamine, a survivor of the Salvation Pastor Project, prevented a disaster of biblical proportions. Don't worry. A stifled voice caressed her neck. I'm probably the only one who's realized it. That or kids who don't plan to make a big deal out of it like me. We won't submit something like this, of course, it's fine, but tell me everything so I can protect you. When did you realize it, and don't give me that protection crap? The church you belong to was the group who allowed the Academia to carry out their calling. What definition of shelter or concealment do you even have? It's taking everything we have to protect you. That's just how big of an impact the cat'll have. So much so that we can't protect them unilaterally. Yeah, that figures, but can't you see that's even more of a reason why I can't trust you guys? Yes, and you're better off not doing so. Even I wouldn't stick up for you if your existence went public. We would probably join those prodding you and say that we'd found the sheep, like we never even knew you. Well, we could say that we were so shocked that you let slip through our fingers, or that we overlooked you. Sure you should be saying all this? I'd disable the surveillance, this place is safe. What even are you? Even the church is its own little hotbed for demons. You need to learn a lot to survive there. Why are you going so far? Got a reason? The usefulness of the power of the cattle. The Power Balance Project expected to go into play in 10 years, and because I have a personal interest in you, is that not enough? Sure as hell ain't. There wouldn't be a need for massacres if those were the reasons. You don't understand politics. Nuclear weapons have significance because they're oligopolized? I've never seen that word in my life. I assume it has something to do with like an oligarchy, like that's a term I've heard, and then like monopolized, and so it's monopolized by an oligarchy, I assume is probably what it means, but I've just never seen that. Oligopolized. It just doesn't sound weird. It doesn't sound real. It just sounds like a made-up word. Now she understood. The cattle, who knew only great misfortune and therefore possessed extremely powerful jinxes, easily numbered over 100, including the actual candidates. If they had been carelessly scattered, there was a risk of an all-out war, but there was also a chance that their threat level would fade if they grew obsolete. They could function as a threat precisely because there were so few survivors. As such, they had been called until there was there were a select few left alive. I feel sick. As I said, we couldn't have brought you here unless such drastic measures were taken. The Salvation Pastor Project was an experiment that tried to create deviants who would bring about the salvation of the world. You, one of their successors, theoretically possess a power that could destroy the world entirely on its own. If we understand that threat, surely you do too. At the very least, you need the resolve to survive on the backs of your fallen comrades. Mitsuji knew everything she was telling her was true. The kind, considerate sheep that was like sister to her fellow cattle. She, who was once considered such by the pastor, could no longer retain such a convenient position anymore. She knew that. It was just hard to accept, that was all. So she said it again. I feel sick. The origin of the Fujiyoshi incident was a fairly standard story. It's a normal kind of activity you see in any group. You look for isolated relationships and investigate whether there's an unknown jinx involved. Unfortunately, most of the time there is. In your preliminary investigation, you detected traces of reality alteration, and so you sent me someone with a similar type of power. Yes, because the church believed you possessed a limited reality alteration power. She talked like she didn't have one herself. Mitsuji wanted to ask her where they'd found a lead on her, but decided to save that for her later. Yeah, that was the pretext you gave, but in actuality, you covered her real power too. I looked over all the questioning records for Rikaku Uematsu. She sought a place of repose in a hellish dream and carried the grudges of the 2,000-year-old Tsuchigumo. I never thought it'd be that huge a story. I just can't see her being safer than the cattle. Nothing we can do. We couldn't detect any sort of strong diabolicity. Diabolicity. That's another weird word from our testimony. They referred to warped humanity that could form the basis of a jinx as a diabolicity. Diabolicity. That's, you know what? Diabolicity. Never show that word again. Right now, she's a slightly twisted, cool-headed pervert. The church wouldn't kill her over that. Well, anyway, for good or for ill, we were compatible. I could exploit a gap in her reality alteration to intervene with my ability. What did you do? The moment reality became a dream, I accessed mine that idiot's memories and shoved them into mine that idiot's heads. Oh, and the reason he kept his memories, it was because they were linked to his soul or something like that, I guess. Well, it's really constellation of mind. I see, so he played a major role in aiding with the resolution of this incident. By the way, was it really just a coincidence that he happened across you? Yeah, if it weren't, I would have quit this job even if it involved killing myself. I wonder, you don't seem the type who can just abandon everything. So anyway, because you just so happened to be a dream wielder and because you just happened to reunite with them, the incident was brought to a peaceful close. Suji lazily nodded. The concept of the sheep and the cattle was to bring salvation through dreams. The concept itself wasn't all that new. If they could show all of mankind a blissful dream, they could attain salvation in their minds. Mankind's interests contain complicated self-contradictions. Achieving universal bliss by optimizing everyone's interests was difficult. So there were two easy methods conceived. Either alter people's values and standardize them, or separate them and satisfy them individually. The former was a common idea that had been attempted to be achieved throughout human history via religion, culture, and morals. The latter was an idea that had shown up in sci-fi and such over the past few decades as the development of the computer networks progressed. Misuji's power was the epitome of the latter. If they could show every human in the world their own blissful dream, all of mankind would attain bliss. Basically, she could use a power that showed others in a very wide range of a specific dream. She could make dreams of all types and could read others' thoughts and memories through the dream, albeit in an incomplete fashion. That skill and subtlety was her true strength. However, there was another method of using dreams. When dreaming, a dreamer is under the illusion that everything happening is real. No matter how crazy things got inside, it was possible not to realize it was a dream, and as long as they didn't, the dream was endlessly real to its observer. However, there were also jinx users who could do unrealistic things that could make the observer want to believe it was a dream. Thus, it was possible to alter reality through dreams. The observer could take the reality they didn't want to believe and swap it for one they did. Dream writing, a reality alteration restoration phenomenon that used denial of supernatural phenomena. It was different from standard reality alteration in that the dream wielder could prepare any reality they desired by merely attaining approval. For example, the reason Mitsuji had been able to prepare the convenience store and all the items Haraki had requested was because those were small-scale reality alterations via dreams. She had told the church that her jinx was nothing more than that, an ability that let her create a base in supplies. It was a handy power to possess, but it did have its limits. She couldn't produce unlimited food to ration all forever, and though she could produce a lifeboat, so it would be difficult to produce a nuclear weapon. Basically, she couldn't attain agreement between the customer and herself to produce anything that definitely couldn't exist in the storage room. Because of this, the reality alteration on a small scale was far from perfect, and all sorts of roadblocks had come up regarding implementation. To say nothing of long-range reality alteration. Creating a single dream that everyone affected could agree upon was next to impossible. In the end, it was a case filled with many self-contradictions to the point of nigh impossible as a way to make everyone happy. Therefore, to jinx users, long-range reality alteration was considered to be, ironically enough, unrealistic, or so it should have been. But this time was different. Rikaku Umatsu was a jinx user who specialized in altering reality via dreams. For example, his spiritual healing was essentially the power to bring her real self closer to her idealized self in the dream. If you ask me, using the roundabout image of a spider or something to bring that out was wasteful. But her true fearsome power was to erase that wastefulness without hardship. True fearsome power? Yeah, that spider's astonishing perception and calculation. A deity given constant justification by folding in 1,000 years worth of countless ancestors' grudges. It's basically a powerful neurological computer. By running the dream manipulation power in parallel to it, the data processing ability of the former bearer of the spiders would be beyond imagination. Of course, it's still difficult to devise an ideal dream through pure calculation, so she came up with a different method. You mean the loop? Yeah. By completely recording the state of fixed area and fixed observers at a certain moment in time, like tearing it out of reality. Or like a camera? Yes, but it's not just images, it's an extraordinary power that records everything happening in that world at that moment. The spider could pull that off and create extremely detailed dreams of the past. So long as it's a past safe experience, anyone can accept it. In other words, a state where everything you worked hard on all day was just a dream. So it forcibly creates a dream world like one straight out of a manga. Yeah, you can think of it like that, but like I said, even that's one hell of a story. I can understand, so basically, even with that power, she couldn't create a dream, where she could conveniently gather all the nourishment, children, as she put it, needed to revive the Tsuchigumo. Therefore, she made use of the murder ritual the village's culture just so happened to have and aimed for the deaths of everyone but herself. Okay. But it's not like she made the whole world loop back for that, right? Exactly, she would have needed a much larger camera for that, and that would be unrealistic. True, that's your theory. The infinite loop Haruaki and I were put through actually occurred in the spider's dream. It was basically a simulation. She let all the characters roam freely from the initial save point. And if the initial failure conditions were met, she retired the dream from the start. And only when she eventually got a good result would she switch that dream for reality. Right, so even when we were going through that hell of a loop, not a single second passed in reality. Okay, so it was kind of in a separate timeline, but she also had the power to then make a result of any... Like, she could have made it real at any time, I think, is what it's going with. That makes sense, I think. This is also due to the spider's incredible calculation ability. It really is fortunate that it failed. Indeed. Another bit of cleverness on Rikaku Amasu's part was setting her own death as the trigger for setting off the alteration. Since she herself had to be immersed in the dream, there's no question that was the best way to go about it. Yeah, she testified as much. She said the entrance to hell known as Saranagawa? I don't think I've seen it spelled like that before, with the extra wa on the end. And the myths were needed to resurrect the Tsuchigumo. Yeah, when you consider the circumstances that brought about the jinx and what it wanted to achieve, it's no wonder she needed to go through such a troubling procedure. But it meant she couldn't just watch over the dream from a safe place. She needed to stand on alert on the killing grounds. It seems she could have set active resets she could use whenever it looked like she was going to fail, but that'd make her unable to counter deadly surprise attacks. In that case, there would have been an off chance that the dream where she died would feed back into reality. And even if she could return to reality, there was no telling how long she would have to wait in the real world until she could restart the dream. Exactly how many times did she loop again? If she's telling us the truth, 176,201 times. I don't think I would keep track of it to that extent. I would have lost count. Even if it only took her a second to reset in the real world, repeating that many loops would mean it would have taken over 2 whole days, more or less. She testified that it took a whole day to invoke the ritual. You kidding me? If it took that long each time, 400 years would have passed in the real world. That's impossible. So the Tsuchigumo of Dreams, who existed partially independently, automatically looped once it detected its life had ended. Thus it no longer needed to dream in order to resurrect, and could reset practically instantly. On top of that, she completed a wasteless scheme where she could promptly try all over again after the absolute failure condition, her death, was met. Exactly. Clever. Now, it may have been a clever setup, but she made a foolish mistake. She ignored those who started taking irregular actions right after the looping began. I mean, Shimi Zurizawa and your ex-boyfriend, right? Don't say that too much. Anyway, those two weren't originally supposed to be there. Memories were kept outside of the reality alteration by the spider, and no one except for itself was supposed to retain those memories. Yet, not only did it not view them with suspicion, but it also invited them, so they could bring about the desired result. That's not the way a Dream Lord fights. The Dream Lord dominates precisely because they have complete control over the dream. It's the role of a Demon Lord. The spider should have driven Haruaki and Shimi out of the dream or killed them at the starting point each time. Yeah, honestly. Should have also striven to bring out about the best result through its own efforts. But instead, she wished for a knight in shining armor. She messed with the starting point just to change the characters in the story. As a result, Haruaki was drawn in, and it all went to waste. If it weren't for that foolishness, we probably would have lost. It must have been a big deal if you're saying all that. Do you get it? This was a vengeful creature over 2,000 years old. It's on a whole different league from us fledglings from the Salvation pasture. And even though it didn't know a thing about jinxes, it came from a bloodline that refined its ability to monstrous efficiency. I'm sure that jinxes on this level are rare, but still, I'm saying this one was no joke. How many incidents as big as this are going to happen in this country in the future? Well, I've dealt with about 3 of them myself. There are unfortunates with dangerous powers who try to use them to get revenge on society. It's not uncommon. You can't avoid those when you work for the church. I'm thinking of having you help me out with those. No, not happening. I'll be devoting myself to courier jobs and logistical support, thank you. Officially, that will indeed look good for you, but I want a full picture of your potential. You mentioned that there was a relatively dangerous moment right before the incident was resolved. Tell me what happened. Misuji hesitated. It would be like revealing an ace up her sleeve. Does she really trust this woman? Looks like you don't trust me. Very well. If you do tell me, then I'll reveal my own ability to you. That'd be nice. Is it the secret to looking as young as you do at whatever age you are? I'd like that. So rude. Well, if you want to know my makeup techniques, I can tell separately, but you're already naturally cute. Normally, Misuji had no interest in her femininity. If pressed, she'd say she wished she'd been born a guy, and her sexual orientation leaned that way to some degree. It was for that reason that her Jinx avatar, the sheep, sounded like a guy. Fine, I'll tell you. Worst case, I'll punish you with a nightmare until you die. Oh my, I would appreciate it if you didn't. I'll be careful not to let anyone else know. It was at this point Misuji successfully set a secret trap to seal her superior in a dream if she went against her word. What was so terrifying about the sheep was it could do that. Oh. I tried it on thin ice twice. The first was when that idiot screwed up. The second was when that idiot intentionally screwed up. I see. Well, put simply, I forced myself into the resurrected spider's head and stole a glance at a snapshot of the starting point. Uematsu had already fulfilled her goal, so she didn't need to press the reset button again. It was only at those times that I did a reality alteration. You refined that moment in the spider's memory into a memory and swapped it with reality, huh? Yeah, more accurately, I returned both the spider and the idiot's memories to the starts, because he needed those memories. To make him agree easily without having him notice the unnatural moment of the swap, she had literally killed Haruaki. Not that she needed to say that, nor did she feel bad about it. It was a bold move for sure, but I'm surprised Rikaku Uematsu didn't notice. Well, the dream wielder is, in a matter of speaking, in a constant state of delusion. I figured she let a little deja vu slide. I thought she'd chalk off that scene of her finally achieving her desire to resurrect the Tsuchigumo as just a dream. And for a while she did. But the last time pushed it too far. The memory the spider had almost forgotten of its first success mixed in with me and Haruaki's memories and was recycled. As a result, I ended up creating a dream that went back further in real time. The spider could clearly notice the abnormality of that. So she called Onimin. Yeah, she probably had no idea that someone with a similar power was operating in secret so close to her, but when she realized it, it all clicked. After all, my opponent had super senses and super intelligent that'd bring military satellites to shame. I may be the sheep, but there's only so much I can do on my own. Still, I endured for 2 days. After that, my avatar was defeated, and I was down for the count. About that, you need to use your avatar whenever you use your powers, right? Are the rest of the cattle the same? Yeah, there are tons like that. After all, they motivated us with the concept of pasturing cattle ever since we were kids. Images of model animals are clear, and it's best to link them deeply with your own imagination. That way it naturally takes shape. Which makes them sloth and gluttony types. I suppose it's appropriate to use animal models. Sounds like the sort of thing the academia would say. Well, I am an academia's qualified diagnoser, despite my position. Still, I'm surprised you made it out okay after the defeat of your avatar. Were there any further complications with your power after that? The core of the diabolicities of our avatars, or metamorphs, are designed to not get damaged by these power-based hazards. I see, so it's like a lizard's tail. The life of a main body is prioritized, and you wait for the moment to escape and get back up on your feet again. Were they seriously trying to cause a war to save the world? I've got no clue what the pastor was thinking. After all, you guys or someone else already killed them. However, the terminal cattle and their candidates believed it, that they would save the world, that the Salvation Pasture would spread across the world. That's a very interesting topic, but let's take care of the report first. Yeah, good idea. Okay, let's go with this. You did nothing. Huh? Situationally, there's no doubt that Rikaku Uematsu had conflicting emotions. That's why they took on form and appeared. Then Rikaku Uematsu's innate goodness or something guided Haruaki Fuseishi and Shinmi Serizawa, and eventually resulted in the Tsuchigumo's defeat. Then what will it say about me? Let's just say you basically spent all the loop sitting around as a convenience store employee. That's too cruel. I know we can't tell the truth, but at least give me a major role. Now, just so you know, ambition is one of the top 3 causes of failure. Consider it fortunate you don't stand out. Alright. Still, those two should be careful. Yeah, I guess. Honestly, in all honesty, Misuji still had feelings for Haruaki. Her relationship with him had awakened, allowed her to exhibit a femininity she never knew she had. It annoyed and embarrassed her whatever she thought about it, and she never wanted to be in a situation like that again. But when she was with Haruaki, he'd allow her to be all that. She dated him with feelings so fresh, she felt like a completely different person. She couldn't deny that for her, who had been living a double life as a spy for the project at the time. The relationship had been very relaxing. Nor could she deny that the 2 years she spent talking to him were now part of her life. However, she also knew she wasn't the type to stay tied down. If they'd kept dating, Haruaki would have likely realized the truth about her and proceeded to interrogate her nonstop. For that was his nature. He would have certainly been led to the project and the jinxes as a result. And then he would have ruined himself, no doubt about it. His disposition was simply that twisted and antagonistic. Whenever he did an activity he considered scary or interesting, he would always give the person he was facing off against a bad time. It was a nasty, cursed fate like that of a protagonist of a story. If she were just an ordinary woman, that would have been fine. Revealing the secrets of neighbors and internal company affairs didn't always lead to life-threatening danger. But in the extraordinary life that Mitsuji lived, he would have been erased before long by someone with conflicting interests. And loath as she was to admit it, she didn't want that. Well, and the biggest reason she broke up with him was because the war between her desire to kill him and her desire to bask more in their relationship had finally come to a close. The black seed sesame pudding had been the trigger for that, and in the end she couldn't reach a compromise with the part of her who'd curled up in his arms and cry. It might be too late for that, though. It might be too late for him, though. Misuji was stunned, feeling like her mind had been read. The mug her superior handed over was full of tepid coffee. What are you talking about? Misuji had long since stopped acting polite for formality's sake around her superior, but she felt this was an appropriate sense of distance. He's gotten in too deep with supernatural phenomena. He has an inkling of the truth about you. We should assume he's formed a contract. In the future, he may awaken as a Jinx user. Or maybe he's already awakened. Huh? There's an archetype known as a detective, right? That refers to dream writing specialization users or Jinx nullifying reality warpers. Yeah, I know, there are kind of people who turn jinx incidents into real incidents through extreme sophism. That's basically what happened with this one, wasn't it? Officially, at least, but your testimony says otherwise. But due to various reasons, there will be no records of it, right? It might be possible, you should probably be careful. But I feel like Shimi Serizawa is the dangerous one. What do you think of her god-slaying power? Doesn't that depend on her definition of a god? I suppose, but in Jinx terms, if she can perceive and kill a demon-like entity, that'll be very dangerous. A demon, huh? I don't think the god she spoke of was that sort of entity. From a Jinx standpoint, humans who travel too far down the path of deviancy were called demons. It was a hypothetical concept of a person who'd lost practically all ability to form relationships with humans to the point where they couldn't even perceive them anymore. However, there were plenty of deviants who alluded to the existence of demons, so they probably existed, it was just hard to prove. On the other hand, the god Haruaki had explained afterwards over the phone seemed to be a type of concept completely different from Jinx's. It was more like an alien or a real ghost. I've heard the recording, so I like to believe I understand it for the most part, but I suppose you're right. A mind-based entity that activates, multiplies, and mutates by being perceived by humans sounds like something out of a sci-fi story. According to Haruaki's definition, Uematsu Tsuchigumo was also apparently a type of god, but Shemi never noticed it, right? In Jinx terms, the Tsuchigumo can be explained with DD. It'd be better to consider it something else entirely, though. It's likely that Rikaku Uematsu was hiding it behind her Shinai faith, but, the idea that the demons and gods are different things is highly possible. But if gods like that exist, then why have we not seen anything similar to them in this world? Fujiyoshi may be a peculiar environment, but it just seems unnatural that they'd be the only one with gods. Hey, you ever hear the story? Oh, is it a perverted story? No, of course not. That's not the kind of person you are, right? Well, when you're as much of a deviant as me, you need to constantly act out of character every now and then. Otherwise, your behavioral patterns are in danger of standardizing. Anyway, the story is about the people who carved laws into this world. What's that? Is it a pasture exclusive? It might be, I guess. It is a Jinx-related story after all. Humans become demons where they deviate too far. Those demons can only be seen by their contractors. But those who boast about forming contracts with demons possess incredible Jinx powers. I've heard about the stories. Isn't it strange? You should need mutual understanding and a contract in order to use your Jinx powers. If you could get that kind of power from an invisible source, wouldn't that completely turn the assumption on its head? Just to reiterate, the Jinx theory is nothing more than a hypothesis, like all the other theories. In the first place, the idea that a single theory can define all Jinx powers is fairly fishy. The story tells the opposite. It says that demons don't break off from the world, they almost assimilate with it instead. Jinxes are the power to warp common sense. That's why they're linked to madmen and why they are barred from normal society from the start. But if an invisible entity, not some lunatic, used a power, it would be really hard to recognize it as a lie or trick. Demons are already being accepted by the world, which makes them harder to see as a result. If we go with this line of thinking, then what happens to a demon that's reached the extreme? By carves laws into this world, do you mean? Yep, that Jinx is incorporated into the laws of the world, and no one finds it strange anymore. Incidentally, I was taught that such a demon becomes a law. For example, when the man called Newton became a law, this world became ruled by Newtonian physics, stories like that. Well, that's quite a daring theory. I can't say I've ever heard it before. Perhaps the reason the modern world has a system is because ancient natural scientists and thinkers brought about their own laws? Exactly, that's not all. Perhaps the being known as Adam became a law and gave birth to Zugami. Sounds just like magic. Yeah, that's why we need to bring about the law known as joy to this world. I see. How magnificent, idealistic, and extreme. Perfect for terrorists. So what does that have to do with what we were talking about? Right, the situation is different, of course. I just don't have a good feeling about this. Because that idiot Haruaki gave the god Shemi had vaguely perceived a clear definition this time. Wait, now I'm getting a bad feeling too. If the laws of the world can be changed after the fact, whether by a demon or something else, then maybe Haruaki's definition of God will take a turn for the worse, and we'll start seeing those sorts of gods pop up everywhere. No, you're making way too much belief there. True, Haruaki might be a little different from a detective. He doesn't deny the existence of the unfathomable, after all. Rather, he has the power to make the unfathomable real by coming up with explanations for them that are compatible with the real world. That's not funny. I'm sure it sure as hell ain't. Still, I wonder. It's still a bother in its own right, but maybe it won't even intersect all that much with our world. Perhaps. Jinx users don't usually cross paths for no reason. Which is why you think we'll definitely see each other again? That's right. After all, the only way we can get stronger is to make the world smaller. You in fact found yourself unexpectedly meeting your ex again after you broke up, and he became the key to resolving the incident. Misuji didn't object. She herself had found it unnatural. It could only be explained by a Jinx-like interpretation of their relationship. I'm sure you'll meet them again at a particular troubling time in the future, though I don't know if they'll help or just make things more complicated. So that kind of hypothesis holds no water. That's not true. At the very least, you're in a position where you have to imagine all kinds of evils. A Jinx that turns para-scientific theories into reality, huh? What would we even call an archetype like that? A magician. What a fitting name. Tired of talking, the pair both brought the cold coffee to their lips at the exact same time like mirror images. It was instant. She'd also put sugar in without asking, not that Misuji was complaining. Anyway, that's more or less what I wanted to ask you. You can sum up the rest, can't you? Yeah, however, what? How do we explain how Rikaku Uematsu lost her entire Jinx at the 11th hour? It's not impossible to lose a Jinx, but at that timing and when the lights went out, it's contrived, plain and simple. All I can come up with is that someone intervened. You should know that the other residents of Fujiyoshi were cleared. Our agent disguised as a bus guide told us as much. Well, there were some deviants, right? True, Haru Makishima and Shikamochi Kamoshida were both on the scene, and there's no doubt their vital samples related to God. Didn't that God, apparently a mysterious and powerful Jinx, exert its influence in annihilating the spider? Well, that's the only conclusion I can come to. By the way, what's the church planning to do with them? Nothing much, we'll keep an eye on them, but they'll be treated like normal people otherwise. I suppose they'll send people to observe them from afar. I wonder if those sorts of standard methods will work on that so-called God. You're being quite cautious of God, aren't you? Well, we did have a faith, you know. I want to show those labeled gods respect and caution. At the very least, the Salvation Pastor Project had incorporated concepts and values from Abrahamic religions. That was also the reason why all the cattle were born on December 25th, on paper anyway. To symbolize they were all messiahs in the making. I've heard that pantheist gods and so-called monotheist gods like Yahweh and Allah are essentially different concepts. That doesn't matter. What's important for us is to know who it is that created the world, provides tribulations, and holds the right to destroy. Do you know why it was that the project was formed? As I understand it, to create their own utopia through eschatological terrorism. I can't completely deny that, but on the other hand, the ranchers in charge of the pasture probably seriously believe the end is near. So they were serious in their mission for salvation? Yeah, they didn't know how the end would come, so they cultivated many cattle. Just so you know, there are many people who cause incidents due to delusions like that, both in and out of Jinx society. I know. Well, it wouldn't hurt if we were idiots who couldn't escape those cases. Also, you church guys or whatever should just protect the world. That's the duty of the wolf who attacked the pastor. The wolf, huh? Feeling her companion's eyes boring right into her, Mitsuji sipped her coffee, leaned back in her office chair, and looked up at the ceiling. At the Salvation Pastor Project, wolf was a code that referred to two things. The first referred to a case where either the project was exposed or an investigation or attack that could have a great impact on the progression of the project came from the authorities or the academia. When they said the wolf was coming, the cattle and those associated with the project were to quickly escape and go into hiding, or so they were supposed to. But in the end, that had backfired due to sleeper agents and defectors, and the project was totally destroyed. The DD, Design Diabolicity production project, a complete first in human history, may have created many with unprecedented powers, but it was lacking in intelligence. The other was a mere legend whispered only amongst the cattle, of a cattle who specialized in killing cattle. That, or it was a plan to deal with cattle capable of destroying the world who had already been released into it. Whatever the case, it was a word that symbolized fear and hostility to the cattle. In other words, Fenrir, the world killing a wolf. However, according to all the central intelligence Mitsuji had come into contact with working as an intelligence officer for the project, no such thing existed. She would have had no way of finding such information if it only existed in the brains of a select few of the top brass, including the ranchers, but it didn't seem likely to her. That said, an aberrant like Mitsuji didn't think it was impossible for there to be an aberrant Jinx user like that. If there was such a user, she'd probably come across them eventually due to the bond linking Jinx users, and if she did, all she could do was fight to the best of her ability. When she thought that, an idea suddenly came to Mitsuji. It was a trifling idea, no memory. Hey, do you have the list of those who live in Fujiyoshi and those who were there at the time of the extrication? Huh? Well, wait, didn't I email that to you along with all the other materials for you to use for the report? Oh, you did? Hey, you're right. What's gotten into you? The recollection immediately became an unpleasant conviction. Someone's missing. Huh? Fujiyoshi currently has 11 residents. There was an old man there who died. 2 journalists came from the outside. Add Shemi, who was visiting back from the city. And that's 14 people. Add that idiot Haruaki and you get 15. But according to him, the Feast of the Omi-Purge had 16 people in it at most. That's a bad oversight. Who's missing from the list? I don't know, but through my avatar, I saw a 4-year-old girl there. I was going to say it's probably Mako. A child? There were no children that young among the residents. That she came from the outside. A child that young? By herself? Under what circumstances would she... The woman's world trailed off for the same reason as Mitsuji. Hey, from your experience, does that thing where Jinx users conveniently cross paths due to their shared bond happen frequently? Yes, quite frequently. Was there a 4-year-old girl who escaped from the pasture? I'm not sure I should tell you. I'm a fugitive. I have no intention of going back at this point. Besides, you know that regrouping is the sheepdog's job, right? Mitsuji had already gone over what the project's plan was if the wolf came, to suspend it and flee. In those situations, everyone was supposed to scatter in different random directions. After all, if an escape route plan had existed, the fugitives would all be rounded up if that ever leaked. In preparation for the arrival of the wolf, a Jinx user was designed for the purpose of regathering the cattle. That was the sheepdog. The sheepdog was a cattle kept under the heavy veil of secrecy, and Mitsuji had never met them. But in the end, they'd been caught and were now collaborating with the academia, so this meticulous plan had grown moot. Mitsuji couldn't blame the sheepdog. After all, she had also thought of selling her comrades to keep herself safe. However, even though she was now hiding right under the church's noses to stay hidden, she feared the sheepdog would find her one day. But that was another story. Swear you won't tell anyone? Break it and I'll tear your face off. Very well. It was a contract. Mitsuji knew the superior was a considerably skilled Jinx user. Thus, she should assume the restrictions had already come into effect. It was like they had each other at gunpoint. Mitsuji gulped, smiled, and steeled herself once more. There are 34 confirmed fugitive cattle. 7 of them are successes, and you're one of them. On top of that, we surmised from the little testimony we have obtained that there were a few children who escaped from the facility just before the academia's attack. The pastor had predicted the attack, which meant that the children they put priority on setting free behind closed doors were kids with the potential to be ideals. Amongst all the kids impounded by the project, only those who showed signs of jinxes were called cattle. There were 3 types of cattle: successes, failures, and ideals. Due to the abnormal education the children raised in the Salvation pastor received, there was a high chance of them displaying a DD and obtaining a jinx. But that didn't mean they'd always get the jinx they'd been aiming for. Those who obtained jinxes that followed their concepts, those that possessed the specs and ability to achieve worldwide salvation, were called successes. Those who developed jinxes that either went against their concepts or clearly didn't match up to the level their concepts had been aiming for were called failures. From what Mitsuji knew, there were about a dozen successes, including herself, while there were supposedly many times more failures. But even the failures had abilities that could prove useful for some project or another, so they were kept in the confines of the pastor's facility. Most of them were ignorant detainees who had supposedly seen the end of the project in the recent attack by the academia. Mitsuji had heard that after that, they were all executed alongside the children who hadn't showed signs of jinxes. This inhuman and unprecedented measure had become well known in their world and had sparked massive debate, but that was besides the point. Though they were called successes, that didn't necessarily mean they were successes for the overall project. For example, the concept of the sheep was to bring salvation through dreams, but it was clear that didn't necessarily mean perfect salvation. It was merely something like euthanasia. Eternally delaying the moment the physical world ended in a subjective world and immersing in a blissful dream was not true salvation. In fact, all of the current successes could only bring about dystopian salvation such as that. Salvation meant as stopgap measures gathered to prepare for the coming end of the world. The successes were stopgap measures with a high success rate but a low salvation rate. Conversely, the Salvation Pastor Project had also been undertaking the creation of DD, even more complicated and delicate, yet capable of attaining true salvation. Those were ideals. As they were wrapped up in much more secrecy as the sheepdog, Mitsuji barely knew a thing about them. I don't know, the info regarding these children was so well suppressed that it's hard to believe it was part of the same project. But that means they must have been important. After all, they wanted to let them go for the sake of the project, even if it meant throwing everything else away. Once the hunt for the fugitives passes its first stage, the sheepdog should end up searching for those children. I see, so I just gotta lay low until then, huh? But if that kid was an ideal, did she get separated from the helper who fled with her? Was there even such a person? If they were treating her so carefully, her helper should have been plenty talented in their own right. Like a skilled failure cattle or something. Would someone like that really do something like leave a child in the middle of the mountains like it would nothing? And more than anything, Mitsuji had a question. The girl she'd seen for just a moment in that gray dream that became reality didn't look the least bit like a powerful ideal. Special jinxes were linked to special diabolicities, so shouldn't ideals be kids who were clearly abnormal? That idyllic girl looked only like a failure at best, and sure enough, Mitsuji's superior was regarding her pensively, as if she had the other answer. What I'm about to tell you is something I found out through my own personal sources. It shouldn't be common knowledge in any circles right now. Quit lording over me. You're not gonna back out of it now, are you? Not when you've come so far. In April, there was a failure cattle who broke free from her restraints and escaped from the academia. It seems she was exactly 4 years old. Her name was the Black Goat. I've heard of it. A failure that grants salvation by returning one to the womb. I've heard it had a fatal lack of capacity. But wait, weren't they all massacred? And you mean those guys were all bested by a child? It seems the academia faked the register of names and took the detainees into custody for data collection purposes. They planned to kill them once they were done. But yes, it looks like the Black Goat is even more dangerous than we imagined. However, several of the academia's top researchers were chopped to pieces. You serious? She probably had a considerably powerful avatar. On top of that, damn it, why didn't I realize it? It seems there were those who suffered mental breakdowns and lost their jinxes. Could this be... Well, that settles it, yeah? That jinx was a concept based on a myth of a Black Goat of darkness, from some mythology that devoured and rebirthed all in creation. That girl, who had been declared a failure due to her limited stomach capacity, probably possessed another perfect ability. In other words, that Black Goat was... The Black Goat devours diabolicities. She'd eaten the diabolicities of all those present when she'd escaped the academia. And after she'd slipped into Fujiyoshi, she'd gone on the run again and devoured Rikaku Uematsu's diabolicity. Interesting. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's the fact that the sheep and black goat just barely miss one another. Yeah, you're right. What would Mitsuji have done if she'd recognized her as the black goat? Would she have abandoned her mission to the church and helping the people of Fujiyoshi to take her and flee? Or would she have presented her to the church for self-protection, offering cheap compassion along the way? That was a pointless supposition. I thought Jinx users didn't cross paths for no reason. Right, which means there was a reason. Are you saying it was necessary for the black goat to escape? I wouldn't know, I hate fatalism. However, the fact she wasn't simply caught means I have a bad feeling about this. What about you? The black goat was still on the run, all while concealing an exceedingly powerful Jinx in her diabolicity. The problem was that it couldn't save the world. If she kept concealing it as she grew up, perhaps it would become a threat that could rival that of the imaginary wolf. No clue. Mitsuji didn't know. To a cattle and fugitive like her, she didn't know if a monstrous entity born into this world like that was a bad thing. Mitsuji Misamine, through activities in the outside world and meeting with Haruaki Fusaishi, knew that the project was inhuman and abominable. They even called the innocent children they turned into monsters for the sake of the project cattle. That girl who'd been born with a heavy burden to bear and had been abandoned by her fellow cattle, like Misamine and the sheepdog, was unmistakably miserable. Didn't she have the right to take revenge on the world? And wouldn't Mitsuji herself be condemned by an entity like that girl for running away without lending a helping hand? Wisely, the adult in Mitsuji avoided answering those questions and pushed them aside. Let's keep all this about the black goat between us, otherwise the truth about you would get out and I'd be investigated as your superior. Yeah, after all, you did let a rather dangerous character slip through your fingers without that oversight in the list. That was your fault too, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Maybe I already knew and let her go. Aha, if you really did, you'd be more shaken up. Sheep-san, you put on a brave face, but deep down you're timid and honest, aren't you? Shut up. The black goat, huh? I'd sure like to meet her. I'm sure you will. You're already pretty deep in this, after all. The bond between Jinxes would likely bring them together eventually. See you later. Yeah. Wonder if we'll learn more about what sort of powers Mako might have. That's very interesting. Her superior now gone, Mitsuji turned back to the PC screen. She deleted the threatening walls of text she'd written, and quickly began typing the fake story she'd been ordered to type up. This kind of report didn't matter anymore. To Mitsuji, the incident had only just begun. She was sure of that. And I think this was actually really good that I read this before doing the Revelation mode, because I don't know if any of this is going... This might contextualize some things that we might learn about how the loop works. The fact that it's all in a dream, but that the dream can become reality. And this, like, pasture project people and these jinxes, like, people with, like, powers of such. I mean, I don't understand it 100%, but I think I get the concept a little bit in terms of, like, people having these powers. And I guess some of them are, like, out in the world. And who knows what they can do. So, yeah, it's very interesting stuff, and I feel like this context might be helpful for the Revelation mode, where we will learn more stuff. Who knows? But that is not the real end. Oh, we have a PS. 6 years later, violent and terrifying criminals known as the Black Goat Septuplets became well known in the world of superpowers. After this, the church successfully made contact with the Black Goat behind closed doors, and the power dynamics in the world of superpowers shifted even further. PBS. 4 years after that, the following conversation occurred in the corner of a provincial city. Okay. Is everything in order? Yeah, but for someone who used to be your ally, you sure did take care of them pretty easily. I don't see or feel the need to draw the line between enemies and allies at the scene of the murder. It dulls you, and it's more trouble than it's worth. How an annoying way to put it. In any case, I'm grateful. Thanks, though I'd say Michan and the others deserve the most credit. Anyway, you should go to your sister's place. I have no choice. I'll have to stay out of school for a little while. Roger, leave the printouts and notes to me. Are you okay with that? I'm asking if you're okay not going after him alongside the others. Well, we should let the two who went forward back, then take lead now, don't you think? Not that any of that matters. How annoying. Oh, well, it's fine. I prefer those who are more mature, composed, and craftier myself. Well, you got the last one at least. Yeah, I guess just how many were tricked this time again. And it sounds like you have a specific person in mind who matches that criteria. Fusayuki-san! You know, I actually just thought of it when they were talking about Miko. I wonder if Miko has some sort of ability to, like, see Haruwaki's true name, and I wonder if Fusayuki is, like, Haruwaki's real name. If that ends up being something that gets brought to the forefront, and that's just something that Miko, like, knows. That's a weird name. Forget it, you're not even interested, right? Yeah. How annoying. Later, then. Later. I don't really understand the context of whatever that was, but, I'm sure it has something to do with what Mako was up to. Of course, this conversation wasn't written in any of the church's records. It would be a little while after this the black goat and sheep would meet again. And maybe that's something in Revelation mode, or maybe it's just a tease for things that could happen in the future. I have no idea. Either way, that was probably the most interesting story so far, even if I don't understand all the details. But regardless, we made it through all the extra stories, which means on the next time, it's going to be time to start Revelation mode, and we can get context that we might not have known, and I think are going to get 2 more endings, and that should fully complete the game. So I am excited to get started on that journey. Hopefully you all are as well. If so, let me know. But I'll see you on the next time. So till then, peace out.